everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing well. So today I thought that I would sit down and talk about something that I really wanted to get off my chest for a while, and it's talking about some of the things that sighted people think that blind / severely sight impaired / just visually impaired people cannot do, but actually can. The reason I wanted to make this video today in particular is because recently I came across a big thing that happened on the internet where a person with a visual impairment who was using a long cane and was using their phone was photographed by a random person on the street, and this person posted the photograph on the internet and basically accused this person of faking being blind. I literally don't know what's wrong with the world. Not all sighted people, I'm not generalising you guys, but there are things that some sighted people seem to think that people who've got visual impairments or people who are registered blind cannot do. And I could have literally composed a list of like 100 things that people think we can't do, but I've had to try and narrow it down to the ones that I think are kind of universally true to the vast majority of us. Or if maybe someone has recently lost their sight, maybe they're not able to do that at the moment, but in time they will be able to learn how to do that skill again. So today I'm going to be talking about the top things that sighted people think that blind people can't do, but actually can 99% of the time. So, are you ready for this? If you are, get yourself a drink and come and sit down with me and I will talk to you about this. So, without further ado, let's get going. The first one that sighted people assume is that all people who call themselves registered blind, severely sight impaired, visually impaired, they all seem to think that we can't see anything at all. Now, this is not entirely prescriptive of every single visually impaired person out there, but for the vast majority of us, this is actually not true. According to statistics from the RNIB charity here in the UK, from their How I See campaign, 93% of people who are registered as either blind or partially sighted, or the new terms, severely sight impaired and sight impaired, can still see something. So it's quite a big percentage of us who still have some remaining eyesight. Now, this will vary in degrees from person to person, and the fact is there are around 200 eye conditions, and each eye condition affects people differently. Not every single person with sight loss is the same. People might be able to see things like light, shadows, colour, text, shapes, outlines. Don't always assume that if a person is calling themselves registered blind, severely sight impaired, or whatever term they might use, that they are completely blind and have no sight whatsoever, even including things like light perception, because it's actually a very small percentage of us who have no sight whatsoever who are visually impaired. Of course, there are people who have no sight whatsoever, but it's a small percentage of us. Actually, a lot of people do still have some remaining eyesight. I identify as severely sight impaired, just out of preference. I have a condition called septo-optic dysplasia and nystagmus. There are many different terms that people with visual impairments will use to describe their sight loss, depending on what they feel comfortable with and also what their condition is. So terms like blind, totally blind, visually impaired, severely sight impaired, partially sighted, sight impaired, all different terms will come up, and each person will use different terms depending on what they feel comfortable with. So if you are confused about what a person can see, the best thing to do is just to ask them politely what they can see, and 9 times out of 10 I would say that that person would be happy to explain it to you. Not every single person who is visually impaired is completely blind, so just remember that, because that is usually the thing that leads people into lots of false ideas about sight loss. The next thing that people assume about us, people assume that people who are blind or visually impaired cannot use a phone. This comes up all of the time. I get it, my friends get it, I know other bloggers who write articles about this, they get it all the time, And it was literally why this whole thing happened recently with this person who had their photo taken when they were using their phone. And in response to it, loads of people on Twitter and Instagram took pictures of themselves using their phones under the hashtag blind people use phones. Whenever I go out and I'm using my phone because I'm checking for a bus, or because I'm trying to text someone, or because I'm looking on social media, or whatever I might be doing, and I've got my guide dog or maybe my long cane, you always get the odd person who says, how is she using her phone? Or, I thought she was supposed to be blind, how's she using her phone? You can ask somebody, how are you using your phone? Because you might be curious, but I honestly feel like people are so accusatory when they say it, like they think that they've caught us out on some big scam. I don't know how many times either myself, another YouTuber, another blogger with a visual impairment, another person on Twitter or Facebook needs to say this, but honestly, we can use mobile phones and other technology besides, like Kindles, laptops, iPads. The list goes on, but people always think that we cannot use them. But think about it like this, okay? If science has advanced that much that we have been able to put humankind on the moon, don't you think by now we've invented ways to enable people with sight loss to be able to send a text? The easiest way for me to prove this is that if you use iPhones or iPads or Apple technology, if you simply go under settings and then into general and then into accessibility, there is a whole host of access features that Apple have developed for people with disabilities, not just sight loss, but all different disabilities, for them to be able to use their phones or iPads or MacBooks successfully being disabled. There's things like voiceover that people can use. People can use Zoom. People can use speak selection, speak screen that can speak the screen out to them. They can invert the colours. They can put a magnifier on their phone to enlarge the screen. There are so many features that people can use, and they can customise to suit their level of vision so that they are able to use their phone easily. I made a whole entire video about how I use my phone as a visually impaired person and the apps that I use, which will be linked above my head. So if you want to go and watch that, then do after this video, and it explains in further detail how I use my phone and what access features I use. So many companies are now making sure that their apps are accessible because we are a big market. Disability is a huge percentage of the population. We're a big market, we're a big portion of the consumer market. So just trust me on this one, okay? People can be visually impaired and use a phone and not be lying about their sight. The next one really does get my go, and it's when sighted people assume that people who are blind or have a visual impairment cannot read books. I have actually come across people in my life when I've been speaking to them about my studies and they've said to me, oh, what are you studying? And I've mentioned to them, oh, I'm studying for a degree in English, or I'm doing a master's degree in children's literature. And then they look at me and they'll say, but how do you read the books? Aside from the fact that the audiobook industry is a booming industry, there are lots of different access features that are on apps and technology to enable people with sight loss to read books. I think people always get this image like we have to have books read to us. Like back in the days of old, before audiobooks, before Kindle devices and phones were developed, of course, people would have kindly read to a person with severe sight loss if they couldn't read the print. There would have been people who would have read to people who were blind or visually impaired. But times have moved on, okay? So there are audiobooks that we can use. There are charities who transcribe books into large print and braille for people. There are apps that we can use that use things like voiceover and speak selection to enable us to read books on apps like Kindle and iBooks. But then the plot thickens, because I have occasionally had people say to me in response to my explanations that technically I am not reading. I am just getting something or someone to read a book back to me. So technically that's not reading, because I'm not visually looking at the words on a page, which I get really offended at, and it really annoys me, and I've actually had arguments with people over it, because I can still spell words. I still know how to form words and sentences. I know how grammatically the words would look on a page. I can still form sentences and paragraphs in my mind. I can hear from the pauses how something would be structured. So just because I'm visually not looking at something with my eyeballs, but I can technically read. But people always assume that people who are blind, just because they have to rely on audiobooks or they have to have voiceover read a book back to them, that means they are not technically reading. When I find that really insulting, because what are you saying, that people who are blind don't read, that they can't spell? We have still been to school. We know how to spell words. We know what grammar means. We know how to use it. We just do it in a different way. Just because we're not looking at something with our eyes, just because we're doing it in a different way, does not mean that we're not reading. The next one I want to talk about is when people who are sighted assume that blind or visually impaired people cannot look at the person who is speaking to them. And I get this on occasion. Sometimes when I'm out and I'm speaking to someone and I'm looking in their direction, I'm looking at them, they say to me, but you're looking straight at me, and they get really weirded out by it. But I do have some remaining eyesight, so I can look at a person and know where they are. I might not always be able to give them direct eye contact because of my nystagmus, which is where I can't focus on things for a long period of time. But also people who are blind get this a lot, and they get an even harsher time of it, because people will say, well, how can you look at me if you're totally blind? Or how can you look at me if you've only got light perception? But we can hear where you are, and we can know where you are, and we can look in your direction. Even at night time when my sight deteriorates drastically, even when someone is talking to me, I know where they are just by the sound of their voice. I know what direction they are in. I might not be able to look at them dead in the eye, but I know where to look at them. I know where their face would be just by hearing from the direction that their voice is coming in. And so can people who are totally blind or have severe visual impairments. They will know what direction roughly to look in. What do they think? People who are blind are just going to be like, oh yeah, what did you get up to on the weekend? Oh yeah, that sounds good. Oh no, I didn't get up too much, it was quite boring actually. I mean, you're going to use your body language, you're going to face them, because you're not going to face totally away from them. You do know what direction roughly to turn yourself in and to give them open body language. You're not just going to be facing over the other way. We do actually know where roughly to look at someone. I mean, we might not be able to give you direct eye contact, but we know where to look at you. And if we can give you eye contact, then, you know, there's a variety of reasons for that. For some of us, we also might have enough sight that we can see your face or we can see your eyes, so we can look at you and speak to you. But that doesn't mean to say that if we do look at you, that we are lying about our sight just because we're looking at you and we're speaking to you. So that's another one that I get, and I get that a lot, and people are honestly so shocked by it. Yes, we can look at you and we're speaking to you, and don't be weirded out by it, because pretty much most of us do it, I would have said. The next one that some sighted people will assume is that people who have visual impairments or who are blind can't use stairs. Often this comes from a place of them just trying to be considerate. So for example, once when I was going to an event and we were staying at a hotel, there was a whole bunch of people with disabilities who were staying at the same hotel. And me and another guide owner were on the ground floor. And there was another person who was upstairs, but they really needed to be downstairs because of their disability. They couldn't climb stairs. And the person said that there were no rooms available downstairs, that they were all booked up. And me and the other guide owner said, oh, that's okay, either one of us can change, we don't mind. And the person who was dealing with the inquiry said, oh, no, we have to leave you down here. You know, we can't expect you to climb upstairs. We'll have to try and move somebody else. And we just looked at each other and thought, we can use stairs. And it's happened to me other times, like when I'm with my guide dog or my long cane, people say, oh no, wait, can you use stairs? Do you need a lift? I think people are just trying to be nice and considerate because they're trying to help accommodate us, but honestly, we can use stairs. I prefer to use a lift. If there is a lift available, I will use it, but if there isn't a lift available, I can use stairs. So people often assume that for whatever reason we can't use stairs because we can't see or have compromised vision, but actually, you know, we can. I mean, of course, there might be people who don't feel comfortable using it, or there might not be stairs that are accessible if they don't have braille markers to show you where the steps end and where they start. But we can use them. We can go up and down stairs either with our guide dogs because they go a step ahead of us so that we know where to feel where each step begins, or with our cane we have a technique where we hold our cane loosely in our hand and the cane kind of knocks back on each step as we go up, so we can kind of count how many steps there are and we can get to the top. So we can use stairs. Some of us might have a preference to not use stairs, but it doesn't mean that we can't use them whatsoever. So yeah, there's another one, we can use stairs. The next one I want to talk about kind of relates to when people assume that we can't use phones. And it's when sighted people assume that we can't or wouldn't want to watch TV. People have often said this to me in the past, well, you know, why do you go to the cinema, or why do you go to the theatre, or why would you want to watch that if you can't see? Like I've said, people might have some sight left so they can still see the TV, or see certain elements of the TV that they're watching. Maybe not everything, but they can still see certain factors of it. But alongside that, there is audio description. So audio description is now available on TVs here in the UK, and you can literally just hit a button on your remote and it starts audio description. Companies like Netflix and iTunes now have a feature where you can play audio description on films or TV shows. So there are ways that we can watch TV accessibly. We can still watch TV by utilising audio description. Audio description is available in theatre shows, you can get it at cinema showings as well. Just because a person has either no sight or limited sight, it doesn't mean that we can't or wouldn't want to watch TV. We still want to watch all the good shows, we still want to watch Game of Thrones. You know, we'll sit there talking about theories about how we think the show's going to pan out, what's going to happen in season 8. Just because we can't see it doesn't change that. We're still fans of TV shows and we still like to watch TV and films and theatre productions. Just because we can't see doesn't mean that we don't want to watch them or can't watch them. The next one I want to talk about is when sighted people assume that people with visual impairments cannot do anything alone. This does vary from person to person greatly, and of course there might be situations where we need help for things like people guiding us or showing us where things are, and just general help for just navigating around places. But the fact is there are situations where we can do things alone. For example, when I went to one of my local gyms that is run by a local council to sign up to a membership, I asked about what would happen with the guide dog, and I said, is there a place that I can leave her whilst I go for a swim? This has happened to me before. I've asked about it and gyms have been more than happy to accommodate me, so they've taken the dog into their office and then I've gone to the pool. You know, she's happy to just sit down with her toy, just lie down and just be fussed over by all the members of staff, which, you know, they love it. They love having a dog in the office. But this member of staff who was working at this gym that I'd never been to before with the guide dog said to me, well, wouldn't you have a carer with you? Isn't that what you would need? And I said, no, I would be coming on my own. And I think people often assume that we need someone with us all the time because we can't see. People who've got visual impairments can go off and live alone. You know, you can go away and study, and you know, I've lived alone for periods of time. I've gone travelling alone. I've done things independently without people there. It's just this thing, people assume that we can't be alone, that we can't do anything on our own, but we actually can in certain situations. Each person is different and they might be able to do different things depending on their level of confidence and what they feel comfortable with. But the fact is that we don't need someone with us 24/7. We can do things independently on our own. The final one I want to talk about today is that people assume that people who are blind or have severe visual impairments can't coordinate colours. Now, of course, for me, I can see colours. There are certain colours that I find difficult to distinguish, like certain shades of blue and purple, but I can see colours. So this one doesn't really apply to me as much, but people often assume, well, how can you coordinate colours? And when I explain to them it's because I can see colour, and there are a lot of people who've got visual impairments who can see colour. Of course, there are people who can't, but people who can't see colour and still coordinate their colours, people often are really confused by how they can coordinate colours and know which colours go with what and what they are wearing, for example. There are lots of different apps that people use to be able to distinguish colour. Seeing AI, which is an app developed by Microsoft, has a feature on it where you can put it up against a colour and it will tell you what colour it is. Or there are other specific pieces of technology that companies sell which are just developed for helping you to know which colour is what. So you can put that little device onto a colour and it will tell you what the colour is. So just because a person might not have any sight that enables them to distinguish colour, or maybe they're colourblind, doesn't mean that they can't coordinate colours. If they know what colour is what, they are able to coordinate colours because they can find another item that matches it, or they can just Google, oh, what colour goes with this, and they can find out, or they can ask for the opinion of a sighted person, or what colour would go with this, and they'll be able to find out. So just because someone might not have enough sight to be able to see colours or distinguish colours doesn't mean that they can't coordinate colours. There are ways around it. So that concludes today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it and you found it interesting. Also, do let me know in the comments if you've got any things of your own to add, any things that people who are sighted assume that you can't do because of your visual impairment. I would really like to know, and I'd really like to get a bit of a discussion going on this topic. Also be sure to like, comment and subscribe to my channel as well if you are new, and also be sure to click the notification bell down below if you want to receive updates when I post new videos, and I'll see you all in my next one. Bye!